Films act as a form of pleasure that allows one to immerse themselves with that world's narrative and characters. Video games, on the other hand, allow the player to experience that world through interaction and curiosity. Unlike a film, there is always a possibility for you to miss something that you may want to see, like an Easter egg about the world that isn't vital to the game's overall narrative. Players are able to interact with a world that is torn by conflicts or climates, and choose how they wish to interact with it. Through the lens of different video games, the battle for dominance will always lead to the total or near total destruction of the other. In post-apocalyptic games like The Last of Us, a zombie outbreak begins with the spread of a fungus that infected all humans, which means nature is directly attacking humanity for dominance in the hierarchy. The fungus is derived from a real-life parasitic fungus that affects primarily ants and spiders called cordyceps, that directly controls the brains of the insects. Society falls apart, man-made buildings and roads are reclaimed by nature amongst the chaos, and remaining unaffected humans battle for dominance against each other. Much like The Last of Us, Stray finds the player as a cat roaming through a city devoid of human life, yet full of remnants of their history there. A plague broke out and wiped out humanity, yet humans still clung to life, as implied by the monologues of the companion robot. The rich and powerful tried to survive amongst the impoverished in the slums, yet they too succumbed to the plague in an attempt to beat nature in an enclosed dome of a city. While slightly differing, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild takes a different approach to a post-apocalyptic setting following the events of the Calamity. Exploring the world, you can see several devastated villages and town wrecks from days long past. Outside of major cities, there are only ever little bursts of civilization where inhabitants are within or just over single digits. These are safe areas for you and NPCs, but they are still at risk of getting attacked by nearby monsters. Thanks to the Blood Moon, all monsters constantly get revived, meaning the NPCs will always be in danger. Some characters are non-human, but eating the meat of poultry does not faze the Rito, as they are not equated to that of a chicken and eat poultry themselves, thus meaning domination is not strictly limited to the humans. When it comes to exploitation, players need resources like meat and bugs to recover health and stamina, and to even give themselves temporary buffs. One of the more important things is using natural resources to upgrade their equipment at fairy fountains and calls for immense exploitation to max out everything. In an article by Navarro Remesal, they say, degrowth would require systems and discourses that did not reward infinite accumulation, that pointed out the damage of excessive consumption in the whole virtual world, reward moderation, showed imbalances between regions, and or recognized the waste produced by the action of the player. Because the world is bound to reset, the player doesn't feel bad for all the things that they do to better themselves in a fight, to take the world back from nature, no matter evil or good-hearted. On the other side of the argument, there are sandbox games like Minecraft that are all about humans' dominance over nature. As a sandbox game, the player is free to do anything they'd like in the bountiful open-world nature of the game. While you're not directly incentivized to do much, the player is prompted to view the world as an exploitable paradise that they control. Players can hoard items, transform the terrain at their leisure, control any mob with sufficient knowledge of their program behavior, and build any structure they desire. They can even create extravagant farms to gain a lot of materials from creature drops, which may be a traditional farm or an auto farm, which instantly kills mobs and collects their drops without any necessary action from the player. Animal Crossing, in a way, is a sandbox game in the way it allows players to decorate their homes, towns, or islands, though compared to Minecraft it has much more restrictions. Despite the innocence of a social simulation game, it still incentivizes players to exploit their natural world for money. In an article by Navarro and Marcel, they discuss how Animal Crossing focuses on consumerism and motivates the player to think of the natural world as one they can exploit. The franchise incentivizes players to pour hours into catching bugs, fishing, and exploiting plants to sell for currency in order to terraform their world and decorate their homes as they so desire. Beyond sandbox games, Pokemon is another title that many could agree is rather brutal, considering that a majority of what it's about is simply the battles. In the games, the player grows a strong connection to the Pokemon they catch and fight with, but it treats the Pokemon as tools to be used for human betterment. While the anime paints general day-to-day livelihoods as something much more harmonic, the games focus primarily on capturing the best team to beat the rest and discarding units as soon as they aren't useful enough. Beyond that, the Pokemon themselves are not worth any more than their stats, or the visuals, to the player before they're thrown into heavily calculated battles to attain victory. The games themselves leave much to be desired when it comes to being able to interact and bond with your Pokemon, and thus leaves the attachment feeling entirely one-sided from a player's perspective. Even so, there are some legendary Pokemon that are godlike creatures with sway over the entire universe. Despite that overwhelming amount of power, humans always triumph because they have the ability to capture them or dissuade them from doing bad. And this implicates that humans have good despite the bad, even if the result of human exploitation leads to Pokemon like Mewtwo, who is subject to endless torture and experiments. This brings up the argument that these games are inherently anthropocentric, anthropocentrism being the inherent belief that humanity is the dominant species over all other living beings. It's not that these games are made with anthropocentrism in mind, but all aforementioned games prioritize player freedom to do whatever it is that they please within the limitations of the game itself. A study that was published in Ambio found a link between anthropocentrism and players who played Animal Crossing. Players behave with a sense of superiority over other animals, especially insects. Environmental destructive actions towards in-game animals and trees are positively associated with anthropocentrism. Even in innocent games like Minecraft, players feel a sense of superiority to the point they'll feel upset to dying to a horde of zombies because they believe that they aren't so bad at the game to die to the weakest enemy. Players can torture animals and monsters alike, or build a world as they see fit without regard for anything else, and in the case of Pokemon, force them to evolve and become stronger to be useful, and that is inherently incentivized by the nature of the game they're playing. However, this can also be true for nature-dominated games like Breath of the Wild, where the player exploits the world and game mechanics to gather food, herbs, monster parts, etc. at their leisure. This never-ending tug-of-war will only ever lead to the destruction of something. Ecosystems balance each other out due to natural predators, selection, etc., yet humanity thrives as much as it does because of advancements in overabundance. Our domination of natural hierarchies leads to an inherent anthropocentric view on our role in the world, despite how we are nothing more than another cog in the bigger picture. The study on Animal Crossing, done by Man-Tuan Ho and his team, as well as the analysis done by Victor Navarro-Remisal, aims to reanalyze our relationship with nature and how we view it. Navarro-Remisal comments, "Video games can invite us to think about nature, to better explore our relationship with it, and to be critical of the problems of our time. At the same time, we as players can reflect on these issues, even through games that do not contemplate them in their construction. If we pour thought into the universes we immerse ourselves in and how we interact with them, maybe they will influence a future where humanity can live in harmony with nature."